It's time for our weekly segment with Max Olson of The Athletic, brought to you by Pioneer Steel and Pipe, where customer service is their main focus, and best in metal, steel, and pipe for large or small projects, with 2 locations in Waco and Bryan. Family owned and operated since 1943.
I mentioned yesterday Max Olson's article on Jalen Daniels of Kansas, and we will get to that with Max, who now joins us, 365 Sports here on this Friday before another weekend of college football. But I want to start with West Virginia last night, Max. They needed a win. They were emphatic, especially with what they did in the second half and how important that was for Neil Brown and the Mountaineers.
Yeah, needed it is the right way to put it. I think that it would be, just the mood around there would be pretty rough right now if they were 1-3. It was impressive for sure. Obviously, Virginia Tech, with first-year staff, not their best football. They couldn't run the ball whatsoever on West Virginia, but I was really impressed. I thought their defense played well. I thought JT Daniels really flashed and stuff, and I thought the running backs they've got at West Virginia looked really good. And over time, you saw the offensive line clear room for them to be able to run the ball. You expect a Graham Harrell offense to fling it around a ton, and they are at West Virginia. But I think they're kind of figuring out their strength is C.J. Donaldson and those backs, and so. Guys, it's funny watching that, and obviously watching Kansas Houston last weekend. Like, who's the bad team in the Big 12 this year?
Oh, there's no gimmies. There are no gimmies. Yeah.
I mean, somebody was going to have to go 5-7 or 4-8, I guess. But as of today, I don't really know who that's going to be. I think probably all 10 of them probably feel like they can make a bowl game this year.
Yeah, and there's a couple teams we don't know much about because they haven't played anybody like TCU, but TCU's not going to be 2-10. So
right.
Who's the stinker, Max? I couldn't even figure it.
And that's that's important for West Virginia. Maybe you could see them potentially being that team, but I thought that was a good rally. They've got some good parts there, and so they're going to go down to Texas next weekend. And that will be a great sign of their progress. But I think West Virginia is going to continue to get better. And, like I said, you look at this conference race, and we're probably going to end up where we often do, where there's probably going to be some really good teams that go 5-4 in conference play this year.
Max, you wrote about Jalen Daniels and what an unbelievable season he's having, and how just the fates of Kansas have completely turned around. What did you really learn about him by getting to dive into what's going on there in Lawrence?
Yeah, it was really impressive kid to talk to. That's someone who's gone through a lot so far in 2+ years at Kansas. Obviously signed to play for Les Miles and play for Brett Dearman, who left after a year. He got thrown into it as a 17-year-old true freshman starter. And you guys, I wrote about it in the story, but you remember he came to Waco in that 2020 season, the first Big 12 game of the year. That kid had to play as a 17-year-old true freshman and only been in the program for 3 months, and it was pretty rough. I mean, he had a pretty rough freshman season. Was one of the worst passers in the country just statistically, and to see him really blossom under this coaching staff, really develop, has been really fun to watch. That offense is really terrific. What Andy Kotelnicki is doing there, very multiple. They added more option elements this year for Jalen Daniels, but with the motions and the shifts and all the misdirection they do, they've built a pretty tough offense around Jalen Daniels. He's a kid who really does believe that he can turn around Kansas football, and he's worked really hard. And it's cool to see them start 3-0 and really have a reason to really believe and be optimistic that you knew they hired the right guy in Lance Leipold, but I didn't think the results would come quite this quickly.
And I guess they're favored against Duke, Max, to start off 4-0. I mean, time will tell, obviously, tomorrow, but they'll be at home. They are slightly favored. I guess my only question with Kansas is just how well are they going to be able to handle the distractions that inevitably are already creeping up because of Leipold and open jobs around the country, starting with Nebraska?
Yeah, that's certainly going to be something that kind of hangs over this for Kansas and probably for Iowa State as well, that, having that Nebraska job out there, he's just probably going to continue to get questions about it and about how, what's his plan in terms of how long you want to stay at Kansas and are you going to entertain these things and all that. And it's delicate. I mean, you gotta try and answer that stuff the right way, but sometimes that's and you guys saw it last year with Orlando, and with every year with Rule, sometimes that just comes with the territory when you've got a really good coach and everybody can tell you're doing something pretty special. So I don't think it's going to be too big of a distraction. That's a coaching staff that does have a bunch of coaches who coached in Nebraska or from Nebraska, their wives from Nebraska. So, if Trev Alberts turns his attention to Lance Leipold in November, it'll be interesting. I'm sure it probably would be hard to turn down that job if they get offered it. But at the same time, with the success they're having right now, you certainly don't feel like Kansas is a dead end job. You feel like if he wanted to stay there and keep building it, I wouldn't blame him. I think there's a reason to be pretty excited if you can have a season like this and really generate some real momentum there.
No doubt. It's a very cool story. I mean, we're getting close to them being the lovable losers. Do we all hate them again? Like, hate them because they're actually a good football team. But you mentioned Aranda and Campbell. They're going to clash tomorrow in Ames. A big game, Iowa State and Baylor. Your thoughts on Cyclones and Bears tomorrow?
From folks I've talked to at Iowa State, Matt Campbell really likes this team. I think they kind of feel like this team has the feel of that team in 2020 that went to the Fiesta Bowl, that they've got some really good players and a team that's really come together. And, starting 3-0 was a big step for them, obviously. And I wouldn't sleep on them, guys. I really wouldn't. I think Hunter Deckers has a chance to be one of the really more dynamic quarterbacks in the Big 12 this year. I think he's got a huge arm. He can really make all the throws. And as he gets more comfortable in that offense, I think he's going to be a big problem. So I think in some ways Baylor maybe is catching them at the right time because it is kind of a young team in some ways, but they're really talented, and I think that Baylor's going to have their hands full. I think it'll be like last year, a game that 4 quarters all the way down to the last few minutes. We
had the Iowa State sideline reporter on. We were asking him about the difference between Purdy and Deckers, and he was like, "Man, the arm strength, whatever else," and he's very impressed with him. And, of course, he's just now getting the opportunity to play. And, yeah, it's just the series is very close. These two teams have been fighting for that same turf, Max, like TCU and Baylor there for a while. And it's become a very intense and very competitive series. To me, this is a game that if Baylor can win, it sets them back up to be a part of the run, although Oklahoma State coming right down the pipeline. Do you feel like this is a game that kind of sets them up, whether or not they'll be involved in late November?
I do. And, at the same time, like I said, with the way this race is kind of shaping up, I mean, I think if you lose 2 conference games this year, it doesn't mean you're out of it necessarily. I think there's going to be, I think there's a little bit of margin for error here. And so that'll be interesting to see. I don't think that anyone should go on the season just off, if whoever, whether it's Iowa State or Baylor fans, I think you're still going to have a pretty good shot here. But, I'm with you. Yeah, I think that this is a great chance for, Baylor's got to continue to take those steps and have those players step up that, replace those seniors that were so invaluable to last year's team and that leadership you had. And, I love the breakout from Reese. I'm interested to see kind of who else starts really, kind of emerging here as those guys they can rely on. But, big opportunity here for Blake Shapen against a defense that's still really good and has one of the best pass rushers in the country in Will McDonald.
Max, we are to the strongly worded letter portion of the Pac-12 battle to keep UCLA. I know George Kliavkoff has to do this, but is this a good look to just write a letter to the board, or just why don't you just let him go?
Yeah, I mean, I in terms of the politics of it all, it's a good question because I thought that too last night, just reading through that. I mean, are you really going to keep them? Are they, how's that relationship going to work moving forward if you block their departure to the Big Ten? I don't really like what are the next steps on that part. That's hard to kind of wrap my head around. I certainly get it in terms of like from a revenge standpoint and just making it more difficult for UCLA. I get it, I suppose. I mean, obviously, when we all went through this in the Big 12 last year, you have those hard feelings. And I remember talking with Bob Bowlesby at the time, and he definitely said he had a lot of feelings that he wasn't proud of at the time. And I'm sure George Kliavkoff has a little bit of that right now. But it's a good question. Like, I mean, what's really the end game? If you block them from going, I suppose that makes your conference stronger. But, can you really hold a whole university hostage in your conference? It doesn't make a ton of sense to me.
Max, Texas, you kind of wondered how they would bounce back after the loss to Alabama, and they bounced back nicely, especially in the second half against UTSA. I know there's still questions about, availability at quarterback and whatnot. But what are your thoughts on them going into Lubbock tomorrow? And, Red Raiders coming off a tough loss to NC State last week on the road.
Yeah, I think you have to say these last two games for Texas is kind of where you're starting to see some progress, where certainly against Alabama, you felt like going into it, it was going to probably be a blowout, and that game would have got away from them in the third quarter. And against UTSA, as much as you tell your team to take UTSA seriously, you still fall behind 17-7. And, if this were Texas teams of old, they would have potentially lost that game. They would have found a way that would have been a tight game and a losable game. And so for them to take care of business and really lean on Bijan Robinson and Roschon Johnson, I thought was a good sign for them. Yeah, this next one's a trap, and they kind of fall hard in this conference. But Texas can't mess around with Tech. Obviously, Donovan Smith needs to limit his turnovers and kind of make that secondary pay for Texas. But I think it's going to be, whether yours is available or not here, I guess we'll see on that. But this is a big one for Texas in terms of you can't take this one lightly, because Tech can put up a lot of points, and we know as they get more and more comfortable in Zach Kitley's offense, they're going to be a problem. So, I think it's I think Texas will pull it out, but wouldn't be that shocked if they messed around and Tech found a way to win it.
All right, one more question for Max. Craig, you got another one for Max?
Sure. I'm trying to think. Florida, Tennessee, or A&M, Arkansas. Which one do you think is more interesting tomorrow?
I think probably A&M, Arkansas. This is going to be. Arkansas, obviously they can put up a lot of points with KJ Jefferson, but defensively, I think that they have some dudes. Obviously, wasn't their best effort against Missouri State, but with the way that Drew Sanders is playing this year, the Alabama transfer, and the guys they picked up, and the experience they have at linebacker, I think it's going to be a really good test for A&M to, you're going to have to. A&M cannot go shot for shot with this Arkansas offense. I really don't think so. So I love the Aggie defense and what they did last week against Miami, but this is going to be a week when Max Johnson or whoever ends up playing at quarterback, they've got to be really sharp, because they don't want to get into a shootout here with Arkansas. I think they're going to be in a lot of trouble if they do. So big week for A&M to take, some steps offensively, because this game is not going to be easy.
Max Olson, appreciate your time, Max. Thanks for coming on today. Max Olson, theathletic.com with us.